Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Danny and Elliot. This is the big fight breakdown for the big fight at super featherweight between Anto Cacace and Josh Warrington on the undercard of Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois, taking place at Wembley Stadium on the 21st of September. If you have enjoyed this video, please do give us a like, please do give us a comment with your prediction on the fight, and please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Danny, Elliot, really good to be joined by you. Obviously, a stacked undercard on September 21st. Lots of good fights, world title fights, 50-50 fights, and a lot going on. So looking forward to getting your views on this one. Josh Warrington's an underdog for this fight. Former world champion in himself. Was one of the best kind of featherweights in the world at one stage, and obviously Cacace, won his world title against Joe Cordini earlier this year. Do you guys agree with that? Should Josh Warrington be an underdog here? I'm seeing odds of 12-5, so a little bit steep. Elliot, what's your view on that? Is Josh Warrington the underdog in this fight for you?
Yeah, you know what, he probably is. I mean, you look at obviously the CV, and obviously you say, the people he's fought probably, obviously had more of a decorated career, but you look at like the recent form that he's been on, and obviously Lee Wood, Lopez, he was a win over Martinez, but Martinez was 75 at the time, I think. And then there's, the Lara fights as well. And I just feel like he's not actually really been in with a legit kind of victory since 2019, probably. So you're looking at like a number of years. And then that victory for Cacace, all right, he may not be as high profile as Warrington was, but decent win over Cordina. So I'd actually would say that probably if you're looking at him purely on form wise and then sort of career wise, I actually would have him. I would have Josh Warrington as an underdog. Yeah, I think that's the sort of smarter betting for me. I mean, maybe in sort of fan mentality, you'd be looking at it and going, "This seems ridiculous," but I actually think it's the common sense one for me. Yeah, so I do believe Warrington is the underdog.
Yeah, where do you stand on? If I was to ask about kind of where Josh Warrington's at in his career, I think I could play devil's advocate here and say he was beating Lee Wood in the fight last year. He had a very close fight against Luis Alberto Lopez before that. Lopez went on to be called the best in the division. Obviously, he lost recently. So Josh Warrington. He's lost these fights, but he's not necessarily he's not been dominated in either of them. So I could make an argument and say Josh Warrington is still a real big contender, whether it be at featherweight or super featherweight. Where's your head at with that debating point, Elliot?
Yeah, if you were to sit opposite me in a pub eating pork scratchings and say that to me, I would say, yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, I think it's very hard to place Josh Warrington because, obviously, he hasn't had a live win for a while, but the people he's been fought have been, a high caliber opposition. So for me, I almost feel like this fight, it's got the potential for Josh Warrington to go either way. I think if he loses this fight, you're looking at him going, "Oh dear, he's not really on that level." But if he gets a victory here, and he sort of restarts the world title sort of bandwagon, maybe we can sit there and go, actually, still, world level fighter. So I actually don't really know how to answer that because we haven't seen him kind of prevail against those sort of people for a little while. So has he slipped? He's not lost to anyone kind of you could discredit really either. So it's hard to sit here and say he's finished, but equally he hasn't won. So I don't know until this fight for me will actually determine that. To be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a really interesting one, Danny. Where's your head at and what we've kind of spoken about? Does it surprise you Josh Warrington's that much of an underdog? And where do you think Josh Warrington's at in his career?
I understand the point about resume. Josh Warrington's got a far deeper and far better resume than Anto Cacace, but just have to echo what Greg says. Just if you're talking about what have you done for me lately, it's not really much of a comparison, is it? That was an excellent win for Cacace over Cordina last time out. And yeah, Warrington's had a really tough 5-6 fights against good guys, as Greg says, but ultimately he's come up short against everyone bar Kiko Martinez. As well as that, stepping up in weight, facing a naturally bigger man in Cacace, who can really punch. Warrington's there to be hit, taking a lot of shots through his career. And the Lee Wood fight, I did feel for him. I did feel he was hard done by, to be honest. I know it was sort of an incident that divided opinion. I just think in a fight of that magnitude, like he's on his feet. He seemed all right in the sort of seconds that followed after the fight was waved off. I think he should have been given that minute. He could have well went out there and got stopped in even more brutal fashion. So there is an argument the referee has actually preserved him, and we're maybe getting a better Josh Warrington as a result of it. However, I just think the miles on the clock coming up against someone who, in Cacace, I think is a very underrated puncher. Carl Frampton always said that Cacace was the hardest puncher he'd ever faced in terms of sparring. I think a lot of people put that down to, oh, he's from Belfast, he's just trying to big him up and give him promotion. I think some people are maybe warming to that slightly after the Cordina fight. He hurt Cordina a lot, battered him, and I think something similar might happen here, to be honest.
We shall see. We shall see. What's the biggest fight for the winner, gents? And the reason why I'm asking this is obviously this is a Riyadh season card, and it feels like once you're in this kind of Riyadh season club, if you win, then you stay on. You kind of get invited back for a big fight. I think obviously the likes of kind of Zhile Zhang is possibly in that club. Joseph Parker. I mean, even Mark Chamberlain seems to now be in that club as well. So it does feel like if you can perform on one of these big cards, you can be invited back and earn lots of money, basically. The Leewood fight, I imagine, will be there for the win. We don't know what Leewood's going to do next. At the time of making this video, he's not had a fight announced. There's other big names in the division. Oscar Valdez is still in the division. Navarrete, I think, still holds a world title in the division. God knows what weight division he's going to compete in next. Could be one of five, I imagine. There's obviously massive fights at lightweight. We don't know if the winner of this fight is going to be in contention for either of those. But what's the fight for the winner of this fight for both of you, Danny? I'll go back to you. What do you think is going to happen for the winner?
Regardless of who wins, Leewood is probably the biggest fight. It's difficult though because the market's so inflated now for these Riyadh season cards that because if you look at 130, the unifications aren't actually massive fights. You're right, Navarrete still holds a belt. That's probably the biggest. And then you've got Lamont Roach and Robson Conceição. Not particularly big fights. However, the worth of them is probably 3-4 times bigger if they're on a Saudi show. In saying that, I do think a Leewood fight is the bigger fight, particularly if Josh Warrington wins, of course. It's much bigger for Josh Warrington than it would be for Anthony Cacace because of the first fight. There seems to be a lot of bad blood between Josh Warrington and Leewood now. It's unclear how much desire Leewood has to fight again, but I think regardless of who wins, Leewood is the biggest fight, particularly if it was to land on another Riyadh season show that was to take place here. I think that could easily co-main it. And if you're a co-main on one of those shows is like one of the biggest pay-per-views we normally get in terms of level of fight. So I think Leewood for whoever is probably the biggest fight. Yeah,
I think one name I just want to mention with both of you as well. It's Zelfa Barrett. That's a kind of a domestic name. Had a fantastic win over Jordan Gill in his last fight. I'll be very honest. I'm not sure what's happening with him next. Things seem to have gone quite quiet, which they do in boxing. Danny, you're the one in the know here. Is Zelfa Barrett likely to face the winner of this fight?
I was actually at Zelfa Barrett's gym last week. I spoke to him, and yeah, this was something that came up. You would have thought. I mean, I really like Josh Warren. I think he's one of the nicest people I've came across in boxing. Really down to earth. He doesn't really deserve this fight ahead of Zelfa Barrett, if we're being honest. And then I spoke to, so apparently there's a bit of history between Zelfa Barrett and Anthony Cacace. The fight was in talks for a British title back in the day. Negotiations broke down, and Anthony claimed that Zelfa didn't want to give him a shot, and now he's sort of getting his own back. Zelfa Barrett seemed to know nothing about this or claimed to know nothing about this. Speaking to him at his gym, he doesn't know why the fight wasn't put to him. He's waiting on a date. He doesn't know what's happening. He's not carrying an injury. He looked in really good nick. He was training. So, yeah, I don't really know what's going on there either. Zelfa, it feels like he's been left on the shelf a wee bit, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll put that down as some sort of exclusive. Elliot, what are your thoughts on this? What's the fight you want to see? It's not. I've mentioned Zelfa Barrett there, Leewood. It's not a division maybe overflowing with domestic talent. We mentioned kind of some unification fights as well. What's the fight you would want to see for the winner? What sort of fight do you think you can see? Because the winner of this fight, you would think would be in a big fight in the early stages of 2025.
Yeah, no, I agree. actually been thinking about this, jotting some notes down, saying that, like, kind of what Danny was saying. I think stay away from Navarrete. To be honest, I don't see that. I mean, it's a good fight on for the sort of boxing perspective, but I just, again, I don't think it's the biggest fight from a sort of pay-per-view Saudi perspective. Lee Wood's obviously there. I also, I wouldn't mind seeing, like, if Josh Warrington won this, I wouldn't mind seeing Warrington fight Cordina. But then obviously Cordina's fighting Stevenson, isn't he? So we'll see how that goes out as well. Whether his stock will really plummet in that fight, or whether he can, come to that with some credibility and into remarketing a fight. I think it's more sort of, for me, it's more kind of, I suppose we're looking at this probably through some bias, but it's more kind of the sort of British interest. I'm looking at this, in a way of sort of Wood, Cordina. I'm even thinking, would there be a market for somehow getting Mr. Scrambled eggs kind of Ben out of somewhere and having him even come into this carousel somewhere if people were going to move up, possibly. I don't know. But I think I agree with Danny. I think Lee Wood. I don't think any of the sort of unification fights, I would watch them definitely, but I would be more interested in the sort of British opponent, frankly, even if it was on a massive Saudi card.
Yeah, but we'll see. Look, I personally think the winner of this fight, Lee Wood's name will be mentioned. I think that's a big fight for Lee Wood. Lee Wood, maybe a bit like Zelfa Barrett, it feels like he's kind of gone through a bit of a lull in his career, despite despite not losing his last fight. So I think that will be a name, but whether that's the fight for the winner, we shall see. All right, gents. Well, we know who the underdog for this fight is. It's Josh Warrington, despite having the better resume. But we are going to go into some predictions. Danny, I'll go to you first. What's your prediction for this fight?
Yeah, I fancy Cacace to stop him for all the reasons I mentioned earlier in the video. Josh Warrington's always been a fighter who's been there to be hit. Moving up in weight, I don't see his power troubling Cacace. He wasn't a fighter he looked sort of chiseled in the face, but his performances would have never indicated that he was struggling the weight. He always had a really good gas tank, but there'll be so many gaps there for Cacace, and yeah, I think he'll take Warrington out somewhere between 6 and 8 rounds.
No, brilliant. I'll go straight to you, Elliot. Do you agree with Danny? Do you disagree? Where's your head up for this one?
I'm actually struggling with this one simply for the fact that I think I can't see Josh Warrington winning, which is weird. But equally, I wonder whether it will go the distance. But equally, if it does go the distance, I think, will Josh Warrington be able to sort of shit house or something on the scorecard? That's kind of, I kind of feel like I'm sort of trapping myself in a way, like in some sort of insolvable problem. But I don't think Josh Warrington's going to win. Frankly, that's all I can say. And even though it kind of contradicts what I'm going to say, but I've got a feeling it might actually come down to points. But I'm going to agree with Danny. I think Cacace is going to win this. Just on kind of, like Danny kind of alluded to earlier. Well, Danny didn't allude to it. He stated it clearly that Warrington's been some very, very tough fights as well. I just feel like the end of Josh Warrington's career is coming, and coming probably sooner rather than later. So I've got a feeling that he's going to lose this fight as well.
Brilliant. I'm going to go against the grain here. I think Josh Warrington maybe has one or two big performances left in him. I think he's been a bit, I don't want to say unfortunate, but just things haven't kind of gone his way in his last couple of fights. But I think there's the weight's an interesting factor here, because we don't know what Josh Warrington's like at that super featherweight. He's spent all those years at featherweight. So we will see what he's like here. I just think Cacace, I think he got Joe Cordina at the best time for him, and that's not his fault. And I think when you take that Joe Cordina win out of Cacace's resume, I think we can debate over what his best win is. Kind of beat Leon Woodstock, Sam Bowen, kind of British level guys, and those wins are a few years back. Cacace, not a young fighter himself. So I'm going for Josh Warrington to win this fight. I'm going against both of you. So we'll see. Look, it's another good fight for the undercard on September 21st, and we will see
points. I assume. Are you going points? Warrington points.
I think either or. If I had to give you a prediction, would probably go for points, but wouldn't rule out a stoppage. I think Warrington, like Cacace, maybe has more power than his kind of KO percentage suggests. I remember when Warrington fought Carl Frampton. Actually, Carl Frampton said afterwards he hit harder than he thought he would do. So I think that's maybe another factor. But if I was pushed, I would go for points.
Maybe Carl Frampton. We need to analyse Carl Frampton. He keeps saying he's getting hit hard by everyone, man. Maybe Carl Frampton needs to work on his punch resistance. I don't know what's going on here, but everyone who seems to have slapped him seems to have hurt him seemingly. But anyway,
yeah, no, I think someone else who's kind of took a lot of punches in their career. Right, all right, we'll leave it there unless anyone has anything else to share. Anyone wants to slug anyone else off? Are we good to go?
I think we're good.
We're good. Okay. Anthony Cacace versus Josh Warrington taking place on September the 21st. Danny, Elliot, good to be joined by both of you. I'll speak to you again very soon.